everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Sprites of Life podcast. I'm Lucas.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Don.
And today we've got a nice, relaxing episode for y'all. So sit back, enjoy yourselves. We're going to have a fun time. Now, with this topic, I'll be honest, I did my research. But, Don, this is more your speed than mine. How did your research come along?
Excellent. I research this topic almost every weekend and often on weekdays.
You want to go ahead and tell them what we're talking about then? Unless if they know you, they know what it is.
Wait, shh. Oh. Got one on?
What are you catching in your apartment, Don?
Okay, I have a house, first of all.
Oh, sorry. What are you catching in your house?
Well, now myself, because I'm surrounded in about 30 yards of line. But it was worth it for the 2-second bit.
There's literally just a raccoon screaming at the other end of the line that we can't hear off the mic.
No, there's no more raccoons here. After my chickens were victimized, there are now no more raccoons.
On that note, we are talking today, folks. We are doing a little bit of a talk on fishing. Honestly, if you can think of like any of the top 10 like games in your life, chances are at least one of them has a fishing mini game. So we figured, why not talk about fishing mini games as a whole? Because they're just like, if you try looking up like all the best games, you will find that most of them have some kind of fishing, especially in
they retroactively put it in Skyrim after like 10 years.
Like, exactly. People go back to put it in because they forgot it. It is incredible. If you really think about it, just how many games have decided we need to give someone something leisurely to do while playing their games. You know what? Just let them go fishing, and it's fine. Just a few strings of code here, a couple of things there. Boom. Fishing minigame, 10 out of 10 game.
And if you're on Xbox, tie achievements to it and make your people play for 300 hours.
I mean, okay, to be fair, Sony does that
Or
too.
if you're RuneScape, make it take all of the hours.
Cue the sea shanty. I'm sorry. That is like one of the best songs to play for 10 hours straight on a road trip.
Sea Shanty 2, actually. That's the one you want.
Whoa, shoot. I'm sorry. Sea shanty 2. My bad. All right, so I do have some particularly fishy news. And listeners, you're more than welcome to voice your opinion on this topic. I'm going to give you all a moment after reading it to process it. 3D printed vegan seafood could someday be what's for dinner.
Ew.
I mean, you don't even know what it's made of. I mean, obviously it's not made of fish. Chris, what do you think?
I mean, look, I'll eat anything. I'm a trash can.
It's true. We did eat at Buffalo Wild Wings at one time. We really will eat anything.
Oh,
but,
we do not disrespect B-dubs on this podcast.
How will we ever get a sponsorship, Lucas?
This stuff is
Oh my god, like, yeah, B-dubs, if you're listening, I'm here for you.
All right. I take it back. Can I get some boneless wings at least?
Boneless wings are nuggets,
okay.
But that's a whole other thing.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
we need
fine.
to be done with boneless wings. They are nugs.
Actually, a guy is currently trying to sue Buffalo Wild Wings over that exact thing.
I hate like pointless lawsuits, but I agree with him in principle.
Another guy also sued, maybe still is suing TGI Fridays. This one I think has merit because their mozzarella sticks are not mozzarella. I think they're American cheese. Ooh. And that is not the authentic Italian experience that I expect when I go to TGI Fridays. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I know, for real.
Okay, moving on. The vegan seafood is made. It's made with a 3D printer. It is made of a mixture of
microplastics.
I mean, that's the fish you normally catch. This stuff is made out of microalgae protein and mung bean protein. And their proof of concept was an air-fried calamari ring that it turns into that they've made into a, I quote, quick, tasty snack. I mean, okay, all joking aside, this is a trend that we have seen people going for with other meats and other foods of trying to make it like vegan approachable. The one thing I will give them points for is that if somebody wants to eat like shellfish or seafood but has a seafood allergy, this might be the closest they can get to actually eating it without going into anaphylactic shock. So, I mean, there is a point to that. And as weird as it sounds, like this is something that people have an interest in a market in. This is one of those times where, listen, if people want to buy this stuff, go right ahead. There's a market for the Impossible Burger. There's a market for other Impossible meats. I don't see why seafood is any different. The big difference isn't so much the taste, it's a matter of how people overfish. And this isn't like the everyday fishermen that we see and we're going to be talking about in this podcast. It's like the mass corporate fishing of sucking the oceans of all the good fish and then just not caring any hoot about regulations. So, I mean, like, this is what we've come to, where, like, a ton of people are just saying, like, you know what? The ocean's getting empty. Time to 3D print our fish. So I feel like we could use this as a threat of, like, hey, stop overfishing, or we're going to have to eat mung bean paste and microplastics in order to survive.
It's not, to be clear, it's not microplastic, microplankton.
No, it's microalgae, but Don had me on it, so, like, it's fine.
Okay.
But
microalgae, yes.
yeah, microalgae protein and mung bean paste. I mean, it is pretty cool that we can do this, but the one problem with every Impossible meal I've ever eaten is that I know what it is just by tasting it. Like, I know it ain't real. Like, and that's the thing they're trying to fight. And to be fair, that's gone a lot farther than the past where you tried eating it and it was just disgusting. So they've come a long way. They're not there yet. They've come a long way.
Did you ever see The Fifth Element?
Yeah, it's cinematic masterpiece.
Good. This just reminds me of when Lilu like pours a couple like sprinkles onto a plate, puts it in the microwave, and like a full-blown rotisserie chicken comes out.
Yeah, like you'll never have as good like food as like in a Studio Ghibli film. I changed that. I want to get the food from The Fifth Element. I just want to be able to get a chicken out of the microwave.
I want a Chinese restaurant to fly up to my window and make food right there. Like what happens in The Fifth Element.
That was really good. See, the food of The Fifth Element is what we need to be talking about, not just all about Ghibli. But obviously, Don, you're not really. I would love to. Don, I would pay for your meal to sit there and eat like the full course of what they offer.
Like honestly, I will say I'm like I don't have the highest opinion of it, but you know what? If someone wants to go out and enjoy that, then like more power to them. And I think people should. And I think it's a good option for either people that normally can't eat seafood but want some level of equivalence experience, or just from an environmental standpoint. So I'll pick on it, but I'll also say more power to you if you're into that.
It just means more fish in the water for you, Don.
I know. I just want there to be more fish, honestly. Like not even for me, just in general. I'm just pro more fish.
Don, weirdly enough, like your method of just like, I'm just going to catch the fish and eat it is the most sustainable of the three of us.
I figured we'd talk about that maybe. I don't know if that was going to be part of the podcast or not.
We are definitely talking about that. But like, I just wanted to point out, like anyone's like, oh my gosh, Don doesn't want to like go out to the Viva. Like, nah, he's the most sustainable one listening to this. Y'all be quiet. Leave my man alone. All the fish stuff. Let's pause on the fish stuff. And let's talk about Pokemon Worlds. Because honestly, that was pretty cool. Like, I think I had a lot of fun watching it.
Yes. So we had Yokohama Worlds, which was very cool. It was the first ever Japanese Worlds. And there was lots of other fun side events. And cool things. They had like a sort of SSN, because I believe Yokohama is the basis for Vermilion City. Remember my lore, right?
Yes. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, they even had a cruise ship docked where you could do battles and other cool things. And it was a very, this unfortunately, I was not able to attend this Worlds. I, didn't try as hard as I should, and also just was not good this season. But I had a lot of friends that went, and a few friends that did quite well. So, but I just want to real quick talk about the teams and stuff we have to see. And this was an odd-numbered Worlds, which means Japan wins because they win every odd-numbered Worlds. It's just sort of like how it be.
How long has this blessing, curse, magic, voodoo been around?
One moment, I have a chart. Okay, so since 2015.
That's a pretty good streak.
Almost 10 years.
Yeah, so 2015 with Shoma, 2017 with Ryota, 2019 with Naoto. So yeah, it continues the pattern. We missed 2021. We didn't have a 2021 Worlds, but I'm sure they would have won.
It's the only way they can be stopped.
But yeah, so this year we had, and like some people are calling it boring, and this is sort of a thing that I don't think people appreciate with VGC, especially at a high level and in certain formats, is you can have a team of the same 6 Pokemon, that you see everywhere, but have like very unique aspects to them. So the winner, Shohei Kimura, who goes by Zine, I think on Twitter, had a relatively standard on paper team of Landers, Therian, Urshifu, Water Urshifu, Fluttermane, Chain Pow, Amoonguss, and Iron Hands. But there's some interesting things. Like one, like he doesn't really have any speed control. But at the same time, a lot of his Pokemon are not their faster nature, even ones you would sort of expect. And the ones that are, so like one, the Landers is Adamant with safety goggles, which is rather cool, I think. Terra Flying with Stomping Tantrum and U-Turn. And Terra Blast instead of, so foregoing Earthquake and Swords Dance and all that kind of stuff. The Urshifu is Adamant with no fighting move, and it has Taunt, which is a very cool tech in my opinion. The Fluttermane is Choice Specs Fluttermane, which we've seen before, and we really saw where this was like the era or the moment of Terra Grass Fluttermane, which we've only seen once or twice before. But I guess it makes sense because one, you take the Surging Strikes from because Urshifu is just not going to blindly click Close Combat and do a Fluttermane before it Terras. So like it's going to click Surging Strikes. So one, like the Terra Grass lets you one just eat that Surging Strikes, and two, we see a lot of Amoonguss in the top echelon. Well, not a lot, but a decent amount. Once you get in the top 16 or so, there's like every other team has Amoonguss on it. Being able to turn into that grass type as a Specs Fluttermane and then just Moonblast whatever the Amoonguss is trying not to have get Moonblasted is really a big advantage. With a Chain Pow, which, Chain Pow Urshifu's been around. You drop the defense, Urshifu does big damage. Again, we have Adamant and with Icicle Crash instead of Ice Spinner. So one just saying, I don't care about the terrain. I want that extra. They're really trading 5 base power of damage for a flinch chance and slightly less accuracy. And we see that on the several Chain Pows in the top 4 are running Icicle Crash over the Ice Spinner that they were running previously. And then we have, good old Assault Vest Iron Hands, pretty standard set, as well as Amoonguss, a lot of Terra Waters. Second place, we have Michael Kelsch, I believe is how you pronounce his last name.
Where was he from?
Germany, actually. I think
Cool.
I think this is the highest placing German player in the
Good for
also
him.
And also like his team I think was very interesting. We had another Chain Pow really had it's funny, of the teams in the top 4, 3 of them have Chin Pow, and the only one with Dragonite is the one that doesn't have Chin Pow. And like anyone that's been on ladder lately knows that Chin Pow Dragonite is like peak Unga Bunga team comp. Yeah, so where is it? Michael had he also had Adamant Chain Pow, and his was Terra Dark, which is interesting. We often see the Terra Ghost. And he was running Double Dark. Again, like very interesting. Like a lot of these teams have the same Pokemon or same several, but very different sets. Like this one is Terra Dark with Crunch on it, which is sort of, we don't really see a lot of Crunch. A lot of the times you see like something like Ice Spinner, Sucker Punch, Sacred Sword.
Mm-hmm.
But totally foregoing that to have a Double Dark move with Terra Dark and being Adamant nature, I'd imagine Terra Dark Adamant, something like Terra Dark Adamant Crunch probably does. I wouldn't be surprised if it KOs like no bulk Fluttermane. And then we had a Assault Vest Heatran, which is kind of a cool set with Terra Grass. I think Terra Grass Heatran is probably the way to play Heatran right now. Choice Band Dragapult, which I'm a big fan. I think Dragapult Chain Pow is just like it's very similar to Chain Pow Dragonite, but I think the skill ceiling might be a little higher, if that makes sense. Like I think it's a tougher combo to use, but I think it can pay higher dividends in the end game, if that makes sense.
So Choice Banded?
Choice Band Dragapult with Phantom Force, Dragon Darts, Terra Blast, and Sucker Punch. Which Sucker Punch is also not too common. Ghost Terra Blast, which makes sense. We have also an Adamant Urshifu again with Choice Scarf this time. More of a standard set. Citrus Berry Rillaboom with Stomping Tantrum, Fake Out, and Protect, which is different. You really see the Fake Out Woodhammer and then maybe like a U-Turn or a Taunt. Stomping Tantrum is pretty unique. And then sort of like the sort of wild card of the top 4, maybe even top 8, we have a Frigoraph, got second place. Which I am, as a Frigoraph fan, I like it. Also, very cool set. Psychic, Dazzling Gleam, Imprison Trick Room.
Oh, they were running Imprison Trick Room. Yes, that's my favorite combo. I love it.
Because looking at this team, I mean, Heatran is not that fast. Everything else, other than, I guess, Rillaboom, is pretty fast. But you could definitely Rillaboom Heat Transfiguraf with something else. You could definitely do a real Trick Room mode with that against other very offensive teams.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all things considered, it was a pretty great Worlds. We got a new announcement before Worlds for the new DLC coming out, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about them. I mean, it was a great time all around.
Absolutely, yeah. We have a lot of new Pokemon dropping with the new DLC. Some new stuff. Incineroar's back, so we can all either rejoice or cry depending on how much we like pivoting.
Gee, I sure feel like learning Earth Power all of a sudden.
No, it's really fun. We're gonna all run Rillaboom, Incin, Urshifu, and it's gonna be great.
Get every Pokemon with competitive on my team just to hurt it.
And then we're gonna also have Fluttermane with it.
Hooray!
Get that Fire Water. You can run the double. Honestly, the double core is going to be very real. I think you can run the Fire Water Grass core with the Fantasy core, the Fairy Steel Dragon.
That might work. I mean, just put a Fluttermane on it. That's all it needs now. 80% of them, like 70 to 80% of the teams had Fluttermanes. That's insane.
Yeah, looking at Top Cut, we have just from Worlds we have, or even just like Day 2. Honestly, I think Urshifu may have even surpassed Fluttermane. I'm just looking. So let me get Top Cut. So 20 out of 26 teams in Top Cut had Urshifu.
Jesus. How many had Fluttermane?
Also 20. Maybe 21 if I'm bad at counting. But I will say Urshifu is kind of weird because a couple of them were not the Urshifu water. So they're like not really quite the same Pokemon.
I like Single Strike Supremacy.
No, the way of the water, my man. The way of the water.
In the top, I know in top 4, I think there was only one Single Strike. Maybe even in top 8, there was only one Single Strike. But that's also because Fluttermane.
Yeah.
Fluttermane be Fluttermane.
So with all the Pokemon stuff out of the way, I don't say out of the way. I love all of it. We got to start talking about some fishing, and I get to do the fun, boring part, kind of a mix-up of talking about the history of fishing because it's really, really interesting to see how it went from, you have to do this to survive to this is just what we do for funsies. So people have obviously been fishing since they realized that things squirming in the river tasted good. The techniques on how to catch fish vary between cultures and ecosystems. Like you could get two people from across the planet who live in mangrove areas, and they'll find two different ways to fish. The earliest methods were simple. You chuck a stick at the fish and you hope you get it. And that just tended to work. And for the next 40,000 years, things just kind of went up from there. We actually find fish hooks from the Stone Age, and some prehistoric people went so far as to poison the hooks to slow down their prey.
Yeah, so one of the earliest forms of fish hooks was the thing actually that was called a gorge, which was basically sort of like a pointy stick, often made of like a little sliver of bone or a stone, and the gorge would have bait on it, and the fish would eat it, and it was like once it had a rope tied to it in the center of it, and when the fish would eat it in turn, the person you would pull tight on the rope, and then the gorge would turn sideways in the fish's mouth and sort of like catch it that way. And then over time, we saw the evolution of hooks, eventually incorporating barbs and things like that to reach the modern style of fishing hooks.
I mean, fish eventually became more than food, though. It became trade. It was your way of connecting with other groups and other villages, other towns, cities. It became so much more because people got so good at it that everyone could now associate like being a fisherman as more than just something for survival. It was a job. It was a role in society. And it became so commonplace that even biblically, it became a universal like understanding. Like whether you believe in anything in the Bible or not, the fact that in the Bible Jesus teaches using metaphors for fishing and using fishermen is something that the poor masses who are usually pretty illiterate could understand, could grasp without an education. It's like, oh, I understand you're fishing for people and helping us get better with ourselves. It's interesting just how intricate that fishing became that you could use that. And you would think that in the past fishing was only used for survival, but we've actually found like records from like ancient Egypt that like fishing was done for sport and even competition. Like there were times in ancient man where they would take a break and actually go do this. And of course it was Egypt because usually when something weird or cool happens in the ancient world, it's China or Egypt. It's usually one of the two.
And I mean, I think there's just an inherent thing about with anything you want to have the best thing. I think
Yeah.
that's just natural human competitiveness, and especially when it comes into something like hunting or fishing. Like obviously, even if you're like using nets or whatever, you want to be the guy that catches the biggest fish. Like even in like ancient times, like one if that was your trade and you were known as the guy that caught the biggest fish, from a business standpoint, that's ideal, and also just from a sheer like prowess and just letting everyone know you're the cool guy standpoint. Like you want to be the guy with the biggest fish.
Bless whoever was farming, or not, bless whoever was fishing on the Nile back then with all those hippos and crocodiles.
I mean, the fact that he got away alive is pretty good, right? I mean, that should speak something for his character.
They're like the rock stars of their days.
No, I'm pretty sure those were like the prophets that they stoned, but that's neither here nor there. In any case, like all leisure pastimes, like the true modern fishing that we know today, it came from rich people who were bored. So these are the people who had time and money and just the resources to put into like everything, including their hobbies, to the point where in the late 15th centuries, there was a book called As Trist Fishin, which was sorry, hang on.
Trees of fishing with an angle.
Thank you. That's how I was messing up. A Trace of Fishing with an Angle. It was a book discussing fishing and hunting methods meant for nobility only. Like this was literally like a book that was basically made like, hey, don't tell the poors how to properly hunt and fish. This is just for us rich folk who don't need it to survive.
Well, so that's partial. That this was a large factor in especially in Western Europe, where fishing and hunting was pretty much reserved for the nobility, like landed gentry type of thing. Like the King's Woods they talk about on Game of Thrones and all that as well. And it's also a time we saw a distinction between, I guess what you would call like a game fish and a rough fish, especially over there. Game fish being things that are desirable for maybe their beauty and their strength of fighting, as well as their table quality. So like a game fish, particular in Europe, is a thing like certain trout or salmon, which would be like sort of like a noble's fish. You have the image of a wealthy person with their fly fishing gear, maybe in the modern age, and then something that's like a carp or maybe a pike is more of a rough fish, and that's sort of more of was viewed as like maybe for like a common man.
I mean, between the 16 and 1800s, though, we did finally get to it to being the common man being around it, and that was in part because of the local.
I also have a copy of the Treatise of Fishing with an Angle, by the way.
You do?
Yes, it's like
What?
it's like a 58th edition, but yeah, I got it at Books A Million years ago.
That's so.
I thought it
I
was
didn't
cool
know
to
you had
have.
that. That's
Shout out
wild.
Books A Million.
I mean, is it a good read?
It's a lot of weird spellings, and more got it for like the
Novelty.
curiosity standpoint.
Well, it's so weird because like yeah, it was intended to be like for like the rich and the nobility, and now it's just some Florida man's house sitting on a shelf.
Well, and then there's speaking of the 1800s, I believe it was published 1881. This is another side book as an avid fisherman, and especially where I live geographically speaking. The Book of Black Bass, related to like largemouth and smallmouth bass. At the time, when it was written, bass were considered to be a rough fish that was not like worthy of respect compared to like the noble trout that lived in beautiful mountain streams. And the book of Black Bass was written in 1881, and basically argued that like largemouth bass and smallmouth bass were like an excellent game fish and deserved to be respected and admired. And it sort of changed a lot of opinion at the time regarding what's now like if you look at there's the Bassmaster Classic, there's not a Troutmaster Classic.
I mean, the fact that they go so hard into it just proves to me that these people.
I also have this book.
Yeah, I figured. But like, it's interesting to me that since again literacy wasn't so high back then, the reason fishing really did catch on was because of like songs and poems that were sung in taverns, and eventually it got to the point where like the nobility couldn't hold on to it, so they decided, all right, fine, let's go ahead and just open up local shops to talk and sell rods and artificial lure. And oh my gosh, like the world of making artificial lures like that are just posted on walls and stuff, Like that's an entire different world I don't want to be a part of. Like that's
Do you know
insane.
about the famous feather theft a while ago?
I was
I
about to
think we
say
talked about it once, but
We
never
did
like.
talk about this. That's right. Okay. I'm not even. That's going to be another 10-minute story, so I'll just skip it.
all I'll say
Yeah.
is, if you are interested in a great heist story, find the book The Feather Thief.
It's incredible. It's an amazing story of just how far you'll go for a fishing lure you'll never actually use.
Yeah, they're not even for using. And
Yeah.
I mean, like, and I tie some of my own flies. And I also collect a few lures, mainly like weird Japanese lures. Shout out to my Kyogre lure. I'm hoping to get a Pikachu lure.
Yeah. So good. I will say, I mean, jumping way into the future, today's sport fishing, it's a worldwide pastime. It's got its own culture, different styles spread around the world.
Its own
Different anglers go
pyramids.
all over the world to go and catch different things. Like, it's incredible just how this pastime is shaped. I mean, it got its own channel on TV. Like, I know, like, it got its own channel on TV with, like, just like golf and any other sport. So I feel that's worth a mention. It also got River Monsters. And, oh my God, that's one of the best shows Animal Planet ever produced was that show. If you've never watched River Monsters, go watch River Monsters.
Yeah,
The
I
show,
think recreational fishing alone is accounts for like $11.5 billion a year in the U.S.
I mean, especially when you consider like the licensing and like the boat
Well,
stuff.
when you get in the licensing side actually of recreational fishing, is honestly all fishing licenses in the U.S. I'm not sure how other countries work in regards to that. All of that money has to go directly to like waterway protection and habitat improvement and things like that. So any fishing license sales are directly benefiting the conservation and habitat of the state where you're fishing.
Now, eventually, when video games showed up, the first ever fishing game was apparently a game called Gone Fishing, made in 1977. And it's weird because, like, with fishing, like, so many different companies have tried making games purely for fishing, and they're not exactly flying off the shelves, like, compared to other games. But then you have fishing mini games in just any average game, and they're like 10 out of 10 games, strongest part of their heart. We love this. And it's so interesting. Why is that? Like, why is a fishing mini game in any game more popular, more respected than like just a random game that's only about fishing?
I think it might be it walks the line of it hits all the things that you want to without getting too into like the details. So like think of something like Mario Kart compared to like Forza, you know? Like there you can get a lot of you get the feel of fishing without having to like know all the intricate details of fishing.
I think it also stems to the fact that fishing on its own, like for most people, is a pastime. Like it's a break from whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it's a relaxing. It sort of has a very like it makes you slow down, and in a game like especially in games that might be more like stressful or something, having that fishing mini game sort of like gives you a time. It's like sort of a nice little breather. It lets you focus on something totally unrelated to the game, but they often typically have some sort of reward that benefits you in the main game, and it kind of lets you slow the pace down at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's something extra to just like, all right, I've been fighting demons all day. Let's go ahead and just catch a fish. And on that note, I mean, we could literally pull up every single game and we'd be here all year. But I kind of wanted to bring up
Do
a
you guys
few of
know
the.
what the early, as far as I could tell, what the earliest game that had a fishing mini game in it is?
Oh, I couldn't find this. Who had the fishing minigame first?
So from what I can tell, I believe it is Link's Awakening.
Get out of here.
Yes, 1990, June 1993, I think it is.
It really was one of the 10 out of 10 games. Noted.
Yep. And that one had a relatively basic kind of we've seen fishing mini games in a lot of Zelda games. It was more like sort of a drop. You drop your bait and you see the fish side scrolling across the screen. And if you catch a fish weighing over 30 pounds, you'll get a piece of heart, I believe. Or no, so the first fish you get of any size, and if you catch one even bigger, you get a piece of heart. And then as it goes on, you can get upgraded lures as well. Which that was an overhaul in the second in the remake, I believe. But it was nice seeing that like they sort of reference that different styles of lures catch different fish, which is very accurate to real life.
I mean, that is pretty impressive that they would actually pull it off all the way back then. But on the other hand, one of Japan's favorite pastimes is fishing. They love
Yes,
the
yes,
heck out of it.
fishing is
Oh my
huge in
god!
Japan, and it's interesting too because bass fishing is massive in Japan now. For largemouth bass.
Don't get me
Um,
started on the bass
and,
problem.
and yes, yeah, largemouth bass are an invasive species, which normally you hear about invasive species in America, so it's kind of a little switch them up to see an American species being invasive somewhere else, I guess, but it's still bad. But and I'm pretty sure there like they have here with a lot of invasive fish, you're supposed to like always kill them. But as a thing that also happens here, if the invasive species of fish is particularly fun to catch, people often don't kill them, and we see that happen in Japan a lot. A fish that actually tied the largemouth bass, the tied the current world record largemouth was actually caught in Japan a few years ago as well. 22 pounds 4 ounces, I believe. Yes, and we there's been a lot of very influential Japanese fishing lures over the years, especially in bass fishing. The Senko is for all the fishing fans out there is a very popular lure. And a lot of like because the Japanese waters are often very highly pressured. There's a lot of there's a lot of fishermen per the water, like the waters are pretty heavily crowded, and the fish are if a fish is caught and released, it gets kind of just learns what not to do to not get caught again. So there's a lot of innovation coming out of Japan in terms of lure design.
That is pretty impressive to think of as how, I mean, like, it's interesting to think that the fish is learning. And I think that would actually be something cool to add into a fishing mini game. Like, if you fish in one spot too long, the fish will learn. And
Yeah,
run
or
away.
if you use a different lure or use a different technique. Yeah, they've done a lot of studies with various species of fish to the point where, like, if certain fish say they were caught on a green rubber worm, they might not hit another rubber worm of any color, or maybe they won't hit something that's green again for a while.
Nice. I will say the other game that that comes to mind when it comes to like fishing mini games for me is Animal Crossing, because Animal Crossing decided that, you know what, we're going to put everything we can think of in these waters, like every single thing. Like I think it should get points for its variety. But then you're someone like me who like works with like fish and like all these different species from all across the world. It's like, what do you mean these are all in your waterways?
Well, and also that you are catching them. You're catching like a goldfish and a squid with the same stick.
Well, theoretically, that's doable.
In the exact same location.
Well, no,
No,
that's
because
the
that's
thing.
not true. The
They're not.
goldfish are in the ponds and the squids are in the ocean.
Yeah,
Okay.
they do make the habit of
And goldfish will mouth things they're curious about, and squids will attack things that are small and shiny. So theoretically, like you could theoretically do it. It's more things that are like a barrel eye, or like I guess you could maybe snag a sunfish, but
a sea butterfly. You could catch a sea butterfly. That was
you could snag one.
Yeah, like with a net, not with like a hook.
No, maybe if your hook snagged it.
It was just drifting there and you grabbed it.
Animal Crossing is what taught me what a coelacanth is.
I love coelacanths.
Wait, it wasn't Relicanth in Pokemon?
No, because remember I skipped Gen 3.
Ah, that's why you're weak. I understand.
Well, actually, no. Animal Crossing came out before Gen 3.
Oh, okay. You're talking about that Animal Crossing. Okay, I'm sorry. No, I'm the dumb one. My apologies.
Pokemon Ruby.
Yeah, that's on me. I mean, you can catch a barrel eye, an orphan. Like, it's really cool the variety they've added, and the fact that you could literally like, can't you like post them in museums and stuff when you?
Yeah, well, you give the first one the Blathers the owl and he puts them in the museum. That was like my character would be living in poverty in a roach infested house, but I would have every fish because like that was my priority. Much like how I live in real life, actually.
Animal Crossing, I think, did more for museum appreciation than any video game ever.
And like honestly, I think Animal Crossing taught people about a lot of species of fish that don't really get it. Like bitterlings are actually a very interesting fish in Animal Crossing. I mean, in real life, not in Animal Crossing. They're the same as every other thing.
They're interesting both.
Yes, but like bitterlings, smelt are interesting. The various char as well. Mitten crabs, arowanas, aeroprimas, dorado. I'm just scrolling through the list. Napoleon fish. A lot of fish that the average person that's not really a big fish enthusiast might be unaware of.
I've never heard of this
You
fish.
know,
I'm going to look up a turkey fish. I have never seen
yes,
one before.
I think a turkey fish is just a lionfish.
Yeah, no, it is just a lionfish. Oh, I want it gone. It's invasive. Kill it.
It's delicious.
Yes, it is. Agreed. It's the only way to get rid of them. That's literally when you work for an aquarium on the East Coast, they talk about lionfish, and all we tell our audience is if you see one, eat it. Like, it's one of my favorite facts to tell anglers. It's like, hey, get yourself a spear gun, go down there and get it. It's tasty.
I mean, you don't even you can easily use like you can go very basic for lionfish getting to it. Is they are much easier to spear though.
All right, Chris, is there any other like fish? Is there a fishing game that like sticks in
Well,
your head?
Speaking of spearing fish, I was very keen to talk about Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
You can
I
spearfish
fell
in
off
that?
Assassin's Creed pretty hard, so you're gonna have to work with me.
I
What'd you
haven't
say,
played
Matt?
one since Black Flag.
Oh, okay. Well, so Valhalla just stick to my mind mostly because it's more so recent, but it actually deals with the gorge fishing you're talking about, Don. Where you're
Oh,
just, like,
really?
you're just chucking a line out there for any fish to grab, and then it's very much the same. Like, you wait for it to bite, and you pull the rope in, and if you don't steer the fish the right way, the line snaps. Like, it's that kind of thing. But I feel like the variety of fish that you can catch in the game are very accurate for the areas because you've got haddock, cod, trouts, Arctic chars, eels, um, things like that around the UK area. But you can also, I feel like it's not as much in other games, but you can go bow fishing.
That's also fun. That's also a viable method of fish. You see that particularly for what like the rough fish that people like talk about, like tilapia, the various Asian carp species, gar, and things like that.
Yeah, I was actually a lot better at bow fishing than gorge fishing. Not that it was bad; it was just I got frustrated with the bigger fish always breaking the line, so I would just shoot them with my bow and collect them. But the
I will say I've never fished with a gorge, but I would imagine it's much harder than fishing with a hook.
the one aspect that they have is if you don't like the fish that are in your little area, you can meditate, and so the time will pass, and you can wake up, and there will be more fish, better fish in your area. Although I don't know how
I
many
wish I
people
could
are
do
just
that.
I don't think that's the most accurate representation of fishing, but the meditative experience of it, I feel like, is something that a lot of people are drawn to with fishing.
I do think that is something that really draws people to fishing. I mean, I fish quite a lot in real life as well, but the fact that you can just really focus on one single thing and you're also out there surrounded by nature, I think is a very like key aspect of fishing that draws people to it.
You got to give a shout out to Ubisoft every once in a while. That is really cool that they actually looked up the historic way to fish back there in that era and time and actually do it.
Yeah,
like, that's important to me.
Go like raid a monastery and then go fishing.
Yeah, I mean that's what you do. Now I will say in his defense, other people were raiding monasteries too. The Vikings were just better at it. I do think in modern gaming, the greatest fishing mini game had to come from Final Fantasy 15. It had to.
What made it special?
You're literally fishing with your boys.
That whole game, you're really just on a road trip with the boys going fishing.
And that's it. Like, you can go and, stop the kingdom from being taken. You can go and get back a vengeance at the people who stole your country. Or you could ride your giant chicken down to the local lake, meet the local wise old fisherman. He'll give you some pointers, and you go fishing. The fishing mechanic was so popular that it got its own VR game. I can't say that for any other fishing game, any other fishing mini game, that it became its own legitimate game. Granted, the game did not do so well. It didn't. Again, it broke the whole now it's a whole game and not a mini game rule. But it really is really good. Like, you go with the rods, you go with the lure, you make sure you can catch different things in different areas. I think it's really cool how they added such detail to it, and in part because it is very much influenced by the Japanese perception of what an American road trip is. If that makes any sense.
Boys.
Time with the boys.
Catching fish.
It's really cool because from a Japanese perspective, obviously they know mainly about fishing, but much of what they see from fishing, there's their older ancestral ways of doing it, but then they'll also see the modern fishing done in the United States, and they'll just kind of do both. So it was really interesting to see, like, instead of a Japanese game like relying on this typical put string in, pull it out style in games.
Classic Animal Crossing, throw in bobber, wait till bobber goes down, reel in.
Yeah, this one was actually like, no, you actually have to time it right. You have to act. Not only are you trying to catch this fish, you also have to make sure that your line doesn't snap. You also got to tire this thing out and move it in. And I do think it's very funny for like a character who can quite literally like fight turtles the size of mountains and win, having to like battle a fish and lose in a strength competition. That is that's my sense of
Fish are very strong.
They are, but like, are they? The mountain is gone because of my fist strong.
I don't know. You're pretty close.
I think the last one I really want to talk about in terms of the importance of fishing and gaming, going right back to where we always go back to, is Pokemon. Because in Pokemon, it was one of the first games I knew of that it lets you change up your fishing gear.
Yes. Some of I believe Ocarina of Time. Well, I think the Ocarina of Time was after the first Pokemon. Yeah. Had multiple lure styles as well. That was also a sort of mini game thing. But you're talking about the old rod, good rod, super rod.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Because no, Ocarina of Time came out afterwards. I was just checking, but it is. Would that actually have like an effect? Like if I used an old rod in the same spot and only caught Magikarps, but then pulled out a super rod and start catching Gyarados?
I don't think, Don, you can correct me. I don't know if it's so much that that different fish would be attracted to it because that's a rod, but I think you would be more capable of catching like the bigger fish because it's just made of better material.
Here's my take on this situation. So the various rod styles, they vary from game to game, but generally we see the old rod is sort of a classic fishing rod cane pole style where it's like a bamboo pole with a string and your lure, bait, pokeball, whatever you want on the end of it, depending on the game. Bamboo is one of the oldest fishing rod materials. Old fly rods were made of bamboo. Old general fishing rods are now they're like a bamboo fly rod is like an antique type of item. And like cane poles are still used typically for smaller fish that are like things like panfish, bluegills, just like your small fishing off a dock with a bobber and a worm is typically when you use a cane pole these days. If you're inclined to use a cane pole. And like, so cane pole being the sort of entry, I feel it's an entry sort of level fishing rod that catches sort of entry level fish in real life. And that sort of translates to the game with it catching Magikarp. It could also be a system of, like a super rod's got typically like a bait caster style reel, like an open faced reel with a lot of line on it. So maybe a super rod lets you cast out farther. Like maybe Magikarp is hanging out real shallow and the super rod lets you cast out farther. So you're in deeper water where the Gyarados are and the Sharpedos and things like that could be part of it. It could also be that maybe the super rod has, a superior type of like lure on it, depending on the game. Like they don't really see what's on it, but maybe the super rod just is intrinsically using like a higher quality bait. Like people will fish for a carp with like a piece of corn, but you're not going to catch a shark with a piece of corn.
Not with that attitude.
Not with that attitude. That's right. But so I think it could be a combination of, and like also, well, maybe the technology, the good rod and especially the super rod are clearly more modern, so they have more sensitivity. I doubt like the bite of a Gyarados is very subtle. So I think it's maybe more of a sort of a distance thing as well as a higher quality bait mate. I don't know, maybe the higher level fishable Pokemon are just more wary of being caught because they're higher level, so they're more suspicious. So maybe it lets you do a better presentation.
Maybe it was what you're saying before. What if everyone basically uses old rods or like good rods and they've gotten more used to it? The super rods are the more upgraded versions, the ones that they're not used to, the ones that they
and you
haven't
have
learned about.
Because that's a thing like I talked about in how Japan, a lot of their bass fishing is very heavily pressured because there's a lot of anglers. There's a high angler to fish ratio, and like often the water is clear and things like that lead to fish being more suspicious. So maybe the super rod lets you have more of a finesse approach, and maybe you're like the extra sensitivity and the style lets you do it in a way that the fish aren't accustomed to.
I think we also need to like stand up and tell Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to bring back fishing.
The Pokemon appearing in the overworld kind of killed fishing in Pokemon. Why break out the fishing pole when like Mantike is just like jumping through the
Have some of them be underwater. sight fishing is a very popular form of fishing now for a lot of like very like desirable fish. Like in Florida, bonefish are typically fished for by sight. So they could easily have like water be very clear in the games, and maybe you can see the Pokemon in the overworld, but they're 20 feet below you, so you've got to like get over them and then present your bait properly for them to eat it.
It's weird that they got rid of it. I know why they got rid of it. It makes sense, but much
No,
like
it doesn't.
fossil
Bring it back.
Pokemon, it makes sense to their game design, but like it's just they need it back. Along with fossil Pokemon. I get it. There's a paradox, time world, blah blah blah. I want my fossils back. Not those weirdos from Sword and Shield, like real legitimate fossils. The last thing I kind of wanted to ask y'all's opinion on before we wrap this up. What would you think if like a Pokemon game made it so that way you could, or like Pokemon or any fishing game made it so you could overfish? Like you're taking about in Valhalla, right? Like if you in Valhalla, was it that you didn't have the right fish and you meditated, or you overfished and you had to wait?
There was they had fixed spawn points, so it was just a matter of what
Hmm.
fish you wanted. So if you were trying to do for a quest and you wanted like sturgeon, if you meditated, you would have a shot at getting the sturgeon when you woke up.
So what I'm thinking is that if like with fishing, I think it would be interesting if like you went to a pond and you just spent like an hour or two fishing and then just things start disappearing and it just has a respawn rate. Similar to
Yeah.
how like a dungeon or anything else, if you like go in there and you take too much, it takes in because that is something we are dealing with fishing. Now, obviously, it isn't mainly due to like random anglers going out and going and casting lure lines. It's a major, huge, overly abundant commercial fishing industry. But I think it was there's like some really nice old school like 50s 60 Americana art talking about like how overfishing can take fish away from the young sort of deal. I like that, and I would love to see that in a game.
Yeah, no, I think having some sort of overfishing, overexploitative mechanic would be one, like sort of just a useful little reference to real life problems.
One of the other things I really like about like fishing regulation is that once you get to a fish of too large a size, in a lot of cases, you can't take them in. Or like things with lobster, like if they are able to reproduce more, you don't want to take them out of the ecosystem so that way you can get more fish.
Yeah, so that's the thing we see now with a lot of game fish, particularly in Florida. I'll use snook as an example. They have what's called a slot limit, which you can keep fish within a certain size. So the fish that are small and still growing are able to keep growing, and the fish that are beyond the slot limit. So let's say that you couldn't keep a fish smaller than 20 inches and bigger than 30 inches. That's not the snook limit. Please don't do that. You'll go to jail. Um, but like a fish
Would.
above that is then like large and it's producing a lot of eggs and really doing a lot for the population, so that fish is also protected. But at the same time, you're allowing someone that catches a fish within that limit, maybe take one home for dinner and have a nice meal, and sort of it just as a nice little extra factor to it, in addition to them just getting to enjoy going out and fishing.
I don't know. It really would be fun. I don't know if gamer developers will take our brilliant ideas, but I think it would be a nice touch to add to it. I don't know. Not just
I
me.
like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm really glad we could actually just sit around and talk about fishing because this is just a relaxing time to do it. I mean, we got Dragon Con Stom working on, so it's just nice to talk about it. And like I said, with Don, your way of actually fishing is, from at least from my understanding, it is the most sustainable way to get seafood. One of the things that I champion at my workplace is sustainable seafood. Like when you're eating sustainably and locally, you can actually help seafood populations out. Like eating lionfish or only eating locally caught or sourced food is more helpful to the ecosystem than just going and randomly buying something from that was fished off of the Pacific, because those fishing regulations are, shall we say, laxed.
Yeah,
And
I definitely agree. And like one, I'm clearly biased. I really enjoy fishing and spear fishing and everything else. But I really just encourage anyone that wants to try it, just get out there. One, do a little bit of homework. Know what you're allowed to keep and what you're not allowed to keep. Don't be the guy that violates the law. You can get in a lot of trouble, and you're also just hurting the resource.
Mhm.
And honestly, don't be afraid to ask around. Look in the local groups. A lot of people, including myself, that love fishing, love talking about fishing. They love getting more people into fishing. So don't be afraid to ask for help in that if you're curious.
I mean, I'm sure the local like shops that sell like any of this stuff would be more than glad to help someone out. Like if they make a
Absolutely.
sale and they get a new person coming in, like to the hobby, win-win for everybody.
A lot of states actually, at least for our U.S. listeners, a lot of states, fish and game agencies actually offer a lot of resources in terms of like particular lakes that they recommend to fish. Maybe it's ones that occasionally get restocked to have higher populations and things like that, where they're doing improvements. And like I said before, like all your fishing licenses and things like that, at least in the U.S., are they go towards conservation. There's actually an act, kind of humorously named the Dingle Johnson Act, that a certain percentage of all fishing gear is earmarked of sales. It's a built-in into the price, is goes towards conservation of waterways and habitat improvement.
Don, you need to take me fishing because I yet to have actually gone fishing in real life.
I'm going to come to Charlotte Regionals. I'm going to take an extra day. We're going to go fishing.
Okay. In January?
Oh, it's January where you are, though? The redfish will probably be moving.
Okay.
Maybe the
Sweet.
sheep's head.
All right, y'all. So thank you so much to listening to us talk about fishing for about an hour. We really do appreciate your listens. As always, share the podcast, share our videos. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening to what we do. We hope to catch you next time. Bye, everybody.